How's it going, everyone? Kevin here with Roll On Gaming, and I am joined by a local celebrity. Some might say a hero. I wouldn't say that. Some people might, though. And that would be the winner of the Emerald Knights Store Showdown, my brother Corwin. Corwin, congratulations. I'm giving you silent claps as to not mess with the microphone, but you took one down despite making the finals in two in season one and not getting there. So, how does it feel to finally break through?
Yes, finally got over the hump. Although I would not, I reject the hero and celebrity labels. Definitely not uh, what I'm after here. But it was definitely good to have a good run. You know, Ray is she's a lot of fun to play. So it was a fun time and it was a good event. Lots of really good competition. Well run at the store. Really good experience all around.
Yeah, just for the record, I don't think you're a celebrity, and I'm pretty sure nobody else does either. But you did
Good.
have a great run to the finals that we definitely want to hit on because, like you alluded to, you brought Ray to a store showdown and won with it. So, with all the other stuff that you've been seeing, winning tournaments and doing well at 1Ks or showdowns or whatever, what was the decision like to bring Ray? Like, what went into that for you?
I think it's pretty simple. Ray has been the deck that I've played the most since the set released, and I think the the reps and the familiarity they matter a lot in like more competitive or more um, serious events with stakes involved. Because some of the decision points and some of the lines you take, they tend to feel a bit more natural because you have played the deck so much, and that was how it was with Luke for me last set. Luke Green was a deck I played a lot for that same reason. It's why I brought it to Showdowns because it was the familiarity factor. Did well there. Same thing for Ray. It hasn't been taking anything huge down, but this is a 20-person event. I felt like my chances were pretty good, and it worked out.
So you're saying that familiarity trumps power level. So I should be bringing Vader to every tournament from here on out.
I mean, not necessarily. You still have to have, you still have to have a deck that can stand up to some of the heavy hitters. I mean, I wasn't about to walk in there with Finn red instead of Ray red. But I do think that it matters on some level because so someone who has a lot of games, a lot of experience with a particular deck is that person, if they know the matchups well and know how to navigate what their deck is giving them, that person will present a very tough match, even if their deck is not as strong. And that's just kind of what I was going for. So it's a consideration point for sure for when you're deck selecting for a tournament.
So I don't think a lot of us would put Ray in like the sort of S tier of deck, of leaders to have a deck built around. So despite the familiarity, did you have any real like concerns about what you might face going into the tournament? Matchups that you were hoping to avoid, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was concerned about a couple of things. Um, hero blue decks in general can have a hard time standing up to bounce. So Boba was definitely a point of concern. I also was not having a ton of success in managing my aggro matchups. You would think for someone like Ray, who has Restore 3 on her side, and with all the hero blue healing, that she might be able to sort of be favored, and she probably is a slight favorite into aggro, but I was having more issues with the aggro matchups than I expected. I think some of the tools that Sabine and Han 2 have gotten for this set are just really incredible. So I was a little concerned about that as well, but at the end of the day I felt like I could pilot my way through those matchups to give myself the best chance to win, and then try to capitalize on the fact that if I had a better game plan than my opponent, even if I wasn't on the better deck, I could steal the match. And so that was something that ended up playing out a little bit, at least in the tournament. But yeah, I would say Boba and aggro were the biggest concerns going in. Control, not so much because of the discard package I was running.
And how much aggro did you end up facing in the tournament?
Huh. I think the only aggro deck I saw was um, in the top cut, but if you count Boba Yellow as aggro, like tempo aggro, I did run into one of those as well. But yes, it was just in terms of the traditional like red green hero, just one.
So let's get into your deck list here because you mentioned you were running a sort of discard package and I wanna walk through some of your choices here. Normally I would ask you about R2 because R2 is what it is, but one, I know it's you. And two, R2 is great with Ray. So this one isn't really that much of a surprise. But Queel to me is a bit of a surprise. Why Queel?
Will was a late ad. I think what I was looking for was I was having a hard time settling on an early game unit that was really going to bring the value that I wanted. And I admit, like, I have been really, really stubborn about having Y Wings in this deck. Like, I've had Green Squadron Y Wing in this deck from day one because I just feel like it's an undervalued card. I still feel that way. Um, in practice, it just wasn't quite getting me to where I wanted it to be. And so I figured, I finally swapped off of it, and because I already had the two restored arcs, I figured I would counter on the ground with a similar unit. So Quill being a 2/3 that restores one and has the chance to draw me a card, albeit a small chance because I'm more blue heavy in this deck than red. Um, an option that I think just kind of fit the overall theme of the deck. So I went with Quill. He saw a little bit of play in the tournament. I think he hit maybe one card. So he wasn't like super impactful, but I think he was definitely it was a good call to move to him over Y Wing in the end.
So that's there potentially, to get you something, even though, like you said, your red is not super high. And I also want to hit on your base in the sense that, you're running Tarkintown. Tarkintown
Mm.
is probably the consensus second best rare base out there. But
Mm.
with your aggro matchup, did you ever feel like you were gonna switch to a 30 health base?
No way. No way. Tarkintown is, in my opinion, an absolute must for this deck. Ray does not she does not if you're going to run red, you don't want to run 30 because Tarkintown is so powerful in a deck that's trying to constantly 2-for-1 your opponent. And not only that, but it's a direct counter to things that are in the meta right now. Decks like Han Blue, which are damaging units to come into play early. Decks like Sabine, which are using ECL to ambush something, or Han 2 ECL. We all know from set 1, Tarkintown can counter that. Kira, when she flips and does all her damage on her flip turn, Tarkintown can show up there. So like, there's just so many applications for it right now with the decks that are out there, and I don't see this version of the deck working without it. Like it was such a huge part of my plan all day long, and I would never advocate for anyone to go 30 HP. I just think it's such a strong base right now.
So what were some of your other like late decision points on the cards in here? Because I do see a lot of one ofs. I wonder like if those were ever two ofs or anything like that. So what were some other problematic decisions that you had when selecting the final 60?
Yeah, I mean, I did this with Luke too. Like I tend to build the decks kind of toolboxy because I really did see Ray as like a control deck. Mainly just trying to stall out until she could get her big bombs on the field. Your Poes, your Lukes, your Chewie, your Crate. Um, Crate has been in and out of the deck. It's like in the main, in the sideboard, back in the main. Um, I ended up sticking with it in the main just for the simple fact that I knew that it could close games against some of the decks that were trying to go long. And that's exactly what it did. I was very happy I had Crate in the main during this event. Redemption was a late ad just because I, again, was needing help with aggro, like a little extra help with aggro. And I felt like if I could get to 8, that was a card that could win me a game. Um, Same with open fire. Like open fire hadn't been in the list for a long time. But that made it in A because I wanted to have some early help against Sabine, but B because once I made the switch to Queel, I was looking for ways to get a couple more red cards in there. So open fire made a lot of sense for that reason. Um, so yeah, I mean that was those were some of the late additions. The other cards, for the most part, except for maybe Jedi Lightsaber, have been in there from pretty much the beginning. Like I've been on all of these other, like everything that's a 3 of, I've been on since day one, and that's all kind of stayed the same.
In terms of your day one cards, I overheard you telling one of your opponents during the tournament that there was a specific card that should be run more frequently in Ray decks. What card was that? Can you enlighten us?
Yes, the MVP of the tournament, and I will die on this hill, and I don't care who wants to fight me. The Force is with me is a game changing card. It is a card that I think every Ray deck should be running. I think every Han 2 blue deck should be running this card. Like it just wins games. It creates situations that become very difficult for your opponent to deal with because you have so many force units. And even if you don't put it on a force unit, it can still do a ton of work. Giving the 2 XP and attack in the same action is huge. And it was doing so much work for me all day. And for the longest time, I had it as a 2 of. I said, there is no way. I need to see this card every single game I play. I need to see this card, and that's why I pumped it up to a 3. I wanted this card over Takedown. I wanted this card over Fell the Dragon. I wanted this card over Pillage. Like basically every 4-cost event, like Forces with Me was number 1 on my hierarchy because it just wins games. Like even in turn 3, turn 4, like you get this down on a Kanan or a Yoda, and you're set. Like you're set up in a way that's difficult for a lot of decks to deal with. So Forces with Me is it was my MVP, and I'm standing by that all the way.
Was there a specific Forces with Me play that closed the game out for you, or was it just solid all the way through?
It was solid all the way through. I've definitely had moments in previous events where I have used it to finish a game, but again, it's not. Sometimes it can be a finisher, like, oh, I need 2 damage, here it is, but it's really more so the fact that it will keep a unit alive like much longer than it should, and that has staying power over the course of 2 or 3 rounds. You know, um, turning Luke into an 8/9 with a shield. Turning again, like I said, Kanan. Like Kanan's probably my favorite target for this card because a lot of times, like you just need something. You need to get up to like 6 damage, which can sometimes be a breaking point for certain units. And so I love playing it on Kanan for that reason. Um, so yeah, it's just one of those cards that it feels good in so many different spots and has so much utility that early, late, mid game, like it always is gonna feel great to play, and that's exactly what happened.
I think the craziest thing about the Forces with Me for me is that it's good now. It's going to be great in November
Yep.
with all the Force
It's not
units we
going
get.
anywhere.
No, it's
It is
not.
not going anywhere, and I think it's just severely underplayed. So if there's anyone that's watching this and thinking about trying this deck out, I strongly encourage you to run a version that runs Forces with Me because I truly believe that it is like in the way I use it, which is basically like removal. It is the best removal card in the deck.
Strong words for a strong card. Before we get into some of the games that you actually played in the tournament, you mentioned previously that you played Luke a lot in set one, and I know that in that deck you struggled a lot against decks that could counter you playing one unit at a time in sequence over the course of rounds. Did you have that problem, or do you have that problem with this deck? And how have you been able to combat that?
I think this deck suffers from a similar issue in that I'm not really trying to go wide. I'm trying to get force units to stick so that I can turn on my force throws, turn on my forces with me's, um, turn on my healing because they're all restore, right? Like they basically all restore, except for Obi-Wan. So and Obi-Wan basically restores because he blocks 6 damage for you, hopefully. So so I feel like, you know, because I want to like basically play on curve for the most part, which is another thing we can talk about because obviously Ray's ability, can kind of get you can get away with playing off curve a little bit. But yeah, I still feel like the one unit per turn, like the bounce strategies can be effective against that. And so that remained a concern, as I said before. And thankfully, I didn't see too much of that in the event. I did face one Boba Yellow and was able to get there, but it's not an easy matchup for sure. So, um, Ray I think is in some ways a little bit extra vulnerable to that too, because if you're trying to use her ability to upgrade units and then they get returned, like that's a lot of resources you've now put into something that's no longer on the field. So it can be a little bit tough, but we thankfully we managed it. We got through it, and it wasn't too much of a factor in this event particularly.
We being you and Ray, speaking in the royal we.
Me and Ray,
I'm just
my
waiting for you
homegirl.
to do the princess wave. Just do the little yes, here I am. So let's talk about your tournament. So this was a 20-player tournament, which meant there were 5 rounds, and then we cut to top 4. So you played 2 additional matches in the top cut. So your first match, you sit down, blue red coming at you.
Yeah, Han Blue was the first match of the day, and yeah, it's funny that that ended up being the case because um, I did have the thought in the week leading up to this event that I was going to switch over to Han Blue from Ray, just because I felt like getting some of these bigger units, more impactful units out sooner was a way to sort of counter one of my weaknesses of, having, units bounced. Like if I could get to them earlier, then they could potentially, do the work they needed to do and then kind of help me, bridge a little bit better to the late game. But that didn't happen. So sitting across from Han Blue with this deck, I felt pretty good because I think Ray is good into Han. Tarkintown's one of the main reasons for that. Like Tarkintown's a direct counter. There were multiple times over the course of the day where Han would open up with a 3 cost thing, and I would just immediately Tarkintown, and I'm way ahead from there. Um, and it doesn't, the Han deck, even though it can cheat out a little bit sooner, um, it just doesn't heal at the same rate that Ray does, and that can be a difference maker. Even with the 5 health difference on the base, Ray's restore is really, really powerful in that matchup. So that was pretty comfortable for me. I was able to get there 2-0 in round 1.
Great. And then in reward for your efforts, you go into round 2 and sit down across from what?
Yeah, so round 2 was a mirror match, and that was not good because mirrors are such a coin flip, and unfortunately in this case, like we both played well, because it's a Ray mirror in particular. The games were going so long, so we split the first 2, didn't get through the third one, and it ended up being a double loss, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I mean, 1-1 could be worse. You're still in the thick of it, especially early on. So what happened in round 3?
Round 3, I came up against a Krennic Green, which was a matchup that I felt pretty confident about. Like I said at the top, I think the hand disruption in Ray really helps the control matchup quite a bit, and it certainly was on display. Um, Game 1, I was able to get off a pillage that discarded an Avenger and a Relentless. And this was like, on the 7 or 8 resource turn. So those ships were coming. And, I was able to get them out of his hand. He didn't really have an answer after that. And when you don't have an answer for things like Luke, Chewie, Crate, like the game's gonna be over quick. So that's pretty much what happened in both games. Like Pillage, obviously shine in that, got it off both games. Um, had some other good discards with K2 and Force Throw, and that was that.
So have you been holding pillage till the late game, or is it just dependent on whether or not you play it on 4 resources?
I almost never play it on 4. Because on 4, I don't want Pillage. I want Kanan.
Mm.
Kanan is my number 1 option at 4. And if I can't get him, then I'm hoping for a K2 or maybe a Yoda and a Ray pump. But I never want pillage on 4 because, they've still got usually 4 cards or maybe 3 cards in hand. And, I don't feel like it's going to have its peak effectiveness. I like pillage later in rounds 5, 6, 7, where it's going to be a little bit more direct in its impact.
So Ray, because of the restore, goes to the late game pretty decently. I feel
Yep.
like, something like a Krennic Green also wants to get to that late game.
Yep.
In the other game that you didn't discard a Avenger and a Relentless, like how are you equipped to deal with some of the things like blue villain control can put out in those late rounds?
Yeah. Well, I think the tricky part about blue villain control, especially blue green, is that I think there are a lot of competing priorities for that archetype, and that's why I really respect anyone who can like pilot those decks well, and certainly my opponent here is one of them, because you're trying to ramp to get to your big stuff. You're also trying to control the board. You're also trying to build board presence of your own so that you can be a threat and potentially trade with some units. And so balancing all of that is a lot for a control deck to manage. In the first game, he drew all 3 power of the dark sides, played them all. And like that was great in terms of stalling me out early on, but then like there was nothing, like he didn't have anything on board. So once he ran out of those like cheap removals and I started to build up a board presence, it was more difficult to deal with. Um, for me, like I don't have great ways of dealing with something like Avenger or Relentless, but I'm just hoping that like I can get him into top deck mode and he's not like top decking like a god. Because if that's the case, like then I'm probably not going to win.
Mm.
Um, but if he's drawing into like, you know, even if he's drawing into like takedowns or or something, like I'm probably okay. So I think the combination of that and then being able to get Crate out is the winning formula. Just hit their hand aggressively, get your big bombs down, and hope they don't top deck into cards that can help them get there.
Great is gross. That is confirmed. So 2-1. What happened in round 4?
Round 4, I came up against Boss Green, which I guess is the new hotness now. Like it's been really making waves. Um, really really strong player on it too. I think this match came down to just some like almost impossible mathematical odds in game 2. Game 1 was very very competitive. We both were playing super tight, and it was another situation where like forces with me. You know, I had a Kanan out. He flipped his Bosk, thinking that he was safe. And how much health does Bosk have? 6, right? So
Yep.
there's Kanan with his forces with me. One shot Bosk, done deal. Um, Game 2, I was not as fortunate to have that set up. He got his Bosk out. He had a Bounty Hunter's Quarry on one of my space units, which he defeated with punishing one, because that's a nice combination. And he got the Bounty Hunter's Quarry twice. It was a non-unique unit. So he got 2 sets of 5, and he missed both.
Wow.
Which, like, when you have, I mean, he was saying he ran like 17 or something 3-cost units. Like, that's crazy math. Like, that's like an almost impossible, like, mathematical outcome. So I got pretty lucky because, ordinarily he would drop like Sentinel, Sentinel, and I'd be in some trouble. But he totally missed. So he had no board. Bosk himself, like, couldn't really stand up. And I just took it from there. So it was another 2-0, like, forces with me definitely did a lot of work in that matchup. And just some really unlucky RNG for my opponent.
Never tell me the odds, Corwin. You got to know that by now. So then round 5, and you get the undefeated Boba Yellow of the group,
Yes.
which is one of your tough matchups, but seemed like
Yes.
you were able to handle it pretty well.
Yeah, the again, game 1 super competitive, super tight. One of the key plays in that game was I was able to get a force throw off to discard a Fet's Fire Spray, which was his last card in hand, and he had no resources up, or he had all his resources up, so that basically blanked his turn. Plus I got 6 damage off of it because I had a force unit out, so I killed one of his guys, and like that was the turning point. Up until then, he played a couple Cantina bouncers. He was controlling me. Um, I was able to get a Poe to stick in that matchup, which was big because even though Boba did get his flip turn off, next turn I was able to take him out with Poe. Um, which is one of the reasons why Poe's in the deck. Like he's there to deal with leaders that are coming out a little bit later and that have that 7 HP. So Poe did his job there. And then game 2, he just like never really found his footing. Didn't have nearly the same kind of board presence he did in game 1. And I just was able to, restore enough to keep myself alive for the late game. And once I got those bigger units down, that was that. So yeah, it was another 2-0 win against that opponent, and that put me at 4-1.
Well, let's be real. But first of all, I got to back up and say one of the reasons Poe's in the deck is not because it's a good card. It's because it's Poe. Like you wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean he's a little bit polarizing, I think, for Ray lists. Not everyone's running Poe. Obviously, I'm gonna run him. He's my guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean he has his advantages. He's not a card I play a lot. As much as I want to play him, a lot of times he ends up as a resource because I'd rather play a pillage or a forces with me on 5 resource turn. But he has his times where he shines, and that matchup was one of them.
So 4-1, you make the top cut, and as always seems to happen, you get paired up with our buddy Top 4 Mike, who once again finds his way into the top 4, only to be met by you. One of these days you're not gonna end his day in the top cut, but it was not this day.
It's true. It's true, man. We just have the worst luck getting matched up in these cuts, and so far, I've been successful in those matchups, but he's gonna get me one day. It's coming.
If Yoda's a leader in set 3, I'm sure he's gonna have the same amount of reps on Yoda.
I do not stand a chance.
Yeah. So shout out to our buddies Top 4 Mike and Aaron for sticking around all the way through the top cut. I had to stick around because I was helping to judge, but also to see what happened.
Judging. Yeah.
But then you get past Top 4 Mike, and a familiar foe awaits in the final.
I don't want to completely skip over that because Mike was running Han 2 ECL, which was one of the matchups I was fearful of coming in. And that was it's a deck that can really put out a lot of damage quickly. Even though it's not quite running the same package as Sabine in terms of like all the rebel. I mean, it has some rebels in there, but it's really looking to leverage ambush in a big way. ECL, timely intervention. He's got modded cohorts in there, which I swear that card is the bane of my existence. Like I have a newfound appreciation for modded cohort after playing him as much as I have. But yeah, just trying to gain a lot of advantage through ambush, and that's something that Ray can sometimes struggle to handle. But thankfully, I was able to work my way through and just heal, lots of heals, which was that's the way that this deck can give itself a chance, and that's what I was able to do. So thankfully, in a matchup that scared me, I was able to get through it and move on.
Yep, you sure did. Confirmed ECL is good, and using it with crazy units that are in red and green hero.
Wrecker, yep. K2SO. I mean, it's nasty.
Yeah, ECL Wrecker is disgusting, and
yes,
and I don't like
it.
And
confirm.
So on to the final, where you play one of the opponents you'd already beaten, but also an opponent who had then beaten me to knock me out of top cut. So shout out again to that opponent, and it's back to blue red for you.
Yeah, so the opponent I faced in round 1 of Swiss on the Han Blue was the same guy who made the final. he had to beat the Boba Yellow to get there. So like, you know, no slouch. He played a very good event, and up until that point, I was his only loss of the day. So you know, we were both playing really well, and but that matchup just kind of went the same as the first one. I mean, he did get game two off of me because he was able to get an early Poe Dameron on turn three with Han's ability, and you know that's the thing about Poe. He's got 6 health, so even with Han's ability, he's out of Tarkintown range, and I just couldn't find the tools to deal with him. I think I drew really event heavy in the middle of that game and just like couldn't get a unit to stick to where I could deal with Poe effectively. And so he lasted like too long. And I wasn't able to recover from that. But otherwise, I mean, it just kind of went the way that I expect the matchup to go, which is, you know, Rey should win. She's got the Tarkintown to deal with Han's ability. She's got the better restore. She's um I mean, I think she's a stronger like leader unit. She has a better leader side than Han does, and so I just leverage those tools to get me there and take a 2-1 victory.
Well, congratulations again. It was a great run, and it was fun to watch towards the end. Um, you know, like you said, the repetitions are apparent because you've definitely fine tuned the deck, which is going to make the next question all the more strange. But you did win the event. You did, you know, many minuscule tweaks to make sure it ran how you wanted. But after 7 rounds of Swiss, right, 5 and then the top cut, is there anything you would change about the deck now that you've played it to the breaking point?
Can I run 4 forces with me? uh, no, I think um, you know, I still think that the sideboard could use some work. You know, there were a couple times where I really could have used maybe like an extra fell, like like Fell the Dragon is a card that's definitely like it's got a lot of play right now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's good in a lot of matchups. I only have one main, one sideboard. I probably would add a second one. I had the Covert Strength in there specifically for Palpatine because that was another matchup that I found was going to be pretty difficult. Didn't see any Palpatine, so that card just sat in the box the entire day. I'm not going to be upset about it. Um, but would potentially rethink that choice. Same with Rivals Fall, because it's just Rivals Fall is a lot. It's a 6 cost to defeat something. It can be really strong in the right situation, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of resources to put into. Like if you're not defeating like a Boba with an armor or like a Bo-Katan with a dark saber or like something like that, it doesn't feel super great to pay 6. So some of those choices I think I would reconsider. Tech was great. Love Tech. Um, but I think overall the 50, the main 50, I feel pretty good about.
Well, you should, because you took down a Store Showdown, and now you have more unrefusable offers than you could ever refuse. Uh,
More than I could ever ask for.
yeah. So you got that nice sweet champion one though, so that one's gonna look nice on the shelf for a while.
Indeed.
And now we are a family of Store Showdown winners. Uh,
Yes, indeed.
so now that means, you know, somebody not named us is gonna win a set 3 showdown because now we've won set 1 and set 2. But you know, we're still gonna to go after it and see what we can do.
Well, somebody on this channel has a planetary qualifier coming up. So
Yeah. Well,
it if you're gonna one up me, that there's the chance. There's the opportunity.
yeah. If I can't make top 4 in a 20-person tournament, then making top 8 in a 128-person tournament is going to be much more difficult. And with only a week and a half to prepare. So I'm not going into it looking to win, but if I do win, that'd be sick. But, you know, it's all a moot point when set 3 comes out, cuz set 3 we're on the train. We are
Fully
on
checked out.
the
Fully
train.
checked out.
So that's it. Wanted to just provide an insight into Rey winning a Store Showdown. which is exciting. Again, congratulations to my brother Corwin for pulling it off and for getting the hot prizes of the summer. We will be back next time to talk about a bunch of Twilight of the Republic spoilers we missed. If you missed our exclusive Twilight of the Republic spoiler, go back on our channel, the previous video. We were able to reveal a card. It's a cool card. It's an awesome card. Go check it out. If you're new to the channel, please feel free to hit the subscribe button because we are going to be talking Star Wars Unlimited all the way up to and through the release of Set 3. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the REY Red deck that Corwin piloted to a victory, go ahead and drop a like on the video. That helps us out a ton. And comment down below what you thought of the deck, if you would make any changes to it, if you're excited to take REY to a planetary qualifier and continue the revolution that Corwin has started.
There it is.
There it is.
Love it.
So shout out to you for winning. Shout out to all of you for listening. For my brother Corwin, I'm Kevin, signing off. Have a great one.